Babylon stood as a monument to power, gold reflecting sunlight across its towering walls and temples. Under King Nebuchadnezzar, the empire demanded complete allegiance, where loyalty was measured not by character, but by obedience to the will of one man alone. Among the exiles taken from Jerusalem were 3 young Hebrews renamed for Babylonian culture. Yet beneath their foreign names remained unbroken devotion to the God of Israel, a faith shaped in captivity and strengthened under silent pressure. They served faithfully in the king's court, excelling in wisdom and integrity. But even as they prospered within Babylon, they never surrendered their identity, quietly holding to convictions rooted deeper than royal authority or cultural expectation. One day, Nebuchadnezzar erected a colossal golden statue upon the plain of Dura, gleaming under the desert sun. It stood as a symbol of his supremacy, demanding not admiration alone, but worship from every nation gathered. A decree was proclaimed across the empire. When music sounded, every official, soldier, and citizen must fall down and bow before the golden image, or face immediate execution in a blazing furnace prepared for defiance. The day arrived. Trumpets, flutes, lyres, and drums echoed across the plain. At the sound of music, thousands dropped to their knees in synchronized submission, fear pressing heavier than conviction across the crowded assembly. Yet in the midst of the kneeling masses, 3 figures remained standing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not bend. Their stillness spoke louder than rebellion. It declared allegiance to a kingdom not built by human hands. Eyes turned, whispers spread. Officials noticed immediately. In a culture where conformity ensured survival, refusal became dangerous. Jealous administrators seized the moment, eager to accuse the Hebrews before the king and eliminate rivals permanently. Brought before Nebuchadnezzar, the 3 men stood respectfully, yet unafraid. The king, astonished by their defiance, offered them another chance. Surely they would bow now when faced directly with royal fury. But their response carried calm resolve. They declared that their God was able to deliver them from the furnace, and even if he did not, they would never serve false gods nor worship the golden image. Nebuchadnezzar's face twisted with rage. Pride wounded by defiance, he commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, determined to display absolute power and crush resistance before it inspired others to stand. The furnace roared as bellows forced air into blazing coals. Flames surged upward violently, heat radiating outward with lethal intensity. Soldiers selected to bind the Hebrews hesitated, aware that even proximity carried deadly risk. Bound tightly in their robes, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were led toward the furnace. Their steps were steady, not rushed, not resisting. Courage does not remove fear. It simply refuses to let fear command obedience. The heat became unbearable as they approached. The strongest soldiers staggered beneath its force. Yet the king watched intently, unwilling to relent, believing intimidation would finally break their spirit and silence their unwavering devotion. With violent force, the soldiers hurled the bound men into the raging furnace. Flames swallowed the entrance, and the soldiers themselves collapsed, consumed by the intense heat they had been ordered to endure. The crowd expected screams. They expected chaos, smoke, and the sound of bodies consumed by fire. Instead, something unimaginable unfolded within the furnace's blazing heart. Nebuchadnezzar rose suddenly from his throne, eyes fixed on the flames. Confusion overtook fury. He leaned forward and demanded from his counselors, "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the fire?" "Certainly, O king," they replied, equally bewildered. Yet the king saw something they had not anticipated. 4 figures walking freely within the fire, unbound and unharmed, their forms illuminated by supernatural light. The fourth figure appeared unlike the others, radiant, majestic, unshaken by flame. His presence transformed destruction into sanctuary. The furnace meant for execution had become a chamber of divine protection. The king approached as close as he dared and shouted into the roaring blaze, calling the Hebrews servants of the Most High God and commanding them to come out from the furnace. To the astonishment of all, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. The flames that consumed soldiers had not harmed a single hair upon their heads. Officials gathered around them, examining carefully. Their clothes were untouched, their skin unburned. Even the smell of smoke had not clung to them. The fire had lost its authority entirely. The king's voice, once thunderous with anger, now trembled with reverence. He declared that no other god could save in such a way, acknowledging publicly the power he had previously defied. A new decree was issued across Babylon. No one was permitted to speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king elevated them to greater positions of honor within the province. Yet their victory was not merely political, it was spiritual. Faith had endured pressure, defied threat, and stood firm within flames. Their obedience had rewritten the narrative of fear into testimony of divine faithfulness. The furnace had been designed to destroy, yet it became a stage where heaven revealed its presence. What was meant to intimidate became testimony, and what was intended for death transformed into undeniable evidence of divine protection. Trials rarely begin with flames. They begin with pressure, subtle compromise, cultural expectations, the temptation to bow slightly while convincing ourselves we remain faithful. The fire simply exposes what was already decided in secret. Long before the plain of Dura, these men had resolved in their hearts not to defile themselves. Faithfulness in private seasons prepared them for public confrontation when obedience demanded visible courage. The world often demands visible submission to invisible idols. Power, approval, security, comfort. Bowing can appear harmless at first, yet compromise reshapes identity slowly until conviction becomes negotiable. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego understood something profound. Worship belongs exclusively to God. To bend physically would mean bending spiritually, and allegiance cannot be divided without surrendering truth entirely. Their confidence was not rooted in guaranteed rescue. They did not claim deliverance as entitlement. Instead, they affirmed God's ability while surrendering to His will, even if obedience led directly into fire. Faith does not manipulate outcomes. It trusts character. The God who formed stars and parted seas remained sovereign whether He intervened dramatically or permitted suffering to unfold temporarily. Nebuchadnezzar believed power was proven through force, yet real authority is revealed through restraint, courage, and unwavering conviction. The three Hebrews stood without weapons, yet their faith disarmed tyranny. When pressure intensifies, identity becomes clear. The furnace did not create their faith, it revealed it. Flames cannot consume what has already been surrendered fully to God's eternal purpose. In the midst of fire, they were not alone. The fourth figure walked with them, unhurried, unafraid, sovereign within the flames. Divine presence transformed terror into sacred ground. Sometimes God prevents the fire. Other times, He enters it with us. Protection is not always removal from difficulty. Often, it is companionship within the very center of trial. Observers expected destruction, yet witnessed freedom. Their bindings burned away while their bodies remained intact. What sought to confine them was consumed first, leaving them unbound inside blazing opposition. Trials have a strange power. They strip away illusions, burn false dependencies, and reveal which loyalties remain when everything else collapses under heat and scrutiny. The king's authority ended at the furnace door. God's authority extended inside it. Earthly power has boundaries. Divine sovereignty does not recognize limitations imposed by human pride. The crowd who once bowed in fear now witnessed courage that defied flames. Faith became visible, undeniable, unforgettable. 3 men had altered the spiritual climate of an empire. Enduring trials does not guarantee applause. Often, it invites hostility. Yet endurance plants seeds that influence generations who learn that courage is possible under pressure. Fire refines gold by removing impurities. Likewise, trials refine believers by removing self-reliance, revealing strength anchored not in circumstance, but in covenant relationship. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not seek martyrdom. They simply chose obedience. Courage is not reckless ambition. It is disciplined loyalty when compromise seems easier. The furnace stood as a warning to dissenters, yet it became a testimony to believers. What intimidates some becomes inspiration for others who witness unwavering faith. Faith in the fire is not loud defiance alone. It is quiet trust, steady breathing, surrendered outcomes, and confidence that God's presence outweighs every threat. The story did not end at survival. It began with transformation. An empire that once demanded forced worship now witnessed authentic devotion that could not be manufactured through decree or intimidation. Nebuchadnezzar saw that power rooted in fear collapses under divine reality. His furnace could heat metal, but it could not melt conviction shaped by reverence for the Most High. Trials often reveal the contrast between kingdoms, the kingdom of self-exaltation and the kingdom of surrender. One builds statues to glorify pride, the other lifts hands to honor God alone. The 3 Hebrews left the furnace unchanged externally, yet their testimony echoed beyond Babylon's walls. Faith that survives flames becomes legacy, shaping future generations to stand without bending. Every believer eventually faces a personal plane of Dura, a moment where allegiance is tested publicly and silence becomes complicity. In such moments, neutrality is impossible. Courage is contagious. When one person stands, others begin to question fear. The example of 3 faithful men redefined what was possible under oppressive rule. Fire does not discriminate. It burns whatever enters it. Yet divine protection does discriminate. It preserves what belongs to God and consumes what seeks to destroy covenant faithfulness. Many assume deliverance must look dramatic. Sometimes it does. Other times, it appears as quiet endurance sustained daily, unseen by crowds, yet precious before heaven. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego modeled a faith that does not negotiate under pressure. Their response to threat was neither panic nor arrogance, but steady confidence rooted in relationship. In every generation, golden images rise, symbols of success, influence, ideology. They demand subtle loyalty, asking only a small bow, a slight compromise, a momentary surrender. Yet small bows shape future decisions. What bends once may bend again. The Hebrews understood that obedience cannot be divided without eroding spiritual integrity. The furnace exposed not weakness, but strength. It proved that devotion is stronger than fear, and that conviction anchored in God cannot be shaken by human decree. Faith does not eliminate trials. It prepares the heart to endure them. Without preparation in quiet seasons, public tests overwhelm even sincere intentions. The 4th figure in the fire remains the center of the story. Divine presence transforms destruction into refuge, turning instruments of death into platforms of revelation. When believers stand, heaven stands with them. Invisible support surrounds visible courage, strengthening resolve even when outcomes remain uncertain. The flames that killed soldiers could not harm those guarded by divine authority. Power that seems absolute collapses when confronted by sovereignty beyond earthly control. And faith in the fire requires surrender of control. The Hebrews released outcomes into God's hands, trusting Him beyond immediate understanding or comfort. Deliverance did not make them proud. It deepened humility. Those who experience God's rescue often emerge with greater reverence, recognizing mercy rather than claiming superiority. The furnace remains a symbol for every trial believers face. Illness, rejection, injustice, uncertainty. Flames differ, yet the principle remains unchanged. Stand firm. Refuse to bow. Trust the God who walks through fire. For faith refined by trials shines brighter than gold, purified 7 times. The legacy of their courage extended beyond Babylon's borders. Stories of unwavering faith travel farther than decrees of intimidation, shaping hearts long after rulers fade into history. Trials often feel isolating, yet the furnace revealed companionship. Divine presence turns loneliness into fellowship, replacing despair with quiet assurance that God never abandons the faithful. The world measures victory by survival alone, but heaven measures it by obedience. Even had they perished, their loyalty would have remained triumphant in eternity. Faith is not absence of fear, it is decision beyond fear. The Hebrews likely felt heat and danger, yet they chose conviction over comfort without hesitation. When believers endure trials, unseen spiritual battles unfold. Courage in one heart strengthens others who silently wrestle with their own pressures and compromises. The golden statue once symbolized dominance. After the furnace, it symbolized fragility. Idols appear powerful until confronted by faith, anchored in eternal truth. Nebuchadnezzar's decree changed, but the greater transformation occurred within hearts that witnessed divine intervention. Revelation often begins where resistance once stood. Every generation must decide whether to bow or stand. The choice shapes destiny, influences culture, and defines legacy in ways that echo beyond a single lifetime. Faith in the fire is not merely historical narrative. It is living invitation to trust God when pressure rises, to refuse compromise when loyalty is tested. And so the furnace stands as eternal reminder. Flames cannot consume what God protects. Stand firm, even when the fire burns brightest. For faith refined by trial reveals the glory of the Most High.